Hope everyone's having a good day. We just got back at about 1 in the morning from a long drive back to southeast Michigan from the Bethlehem, Pennsylvania area. It's about 550 miles, give or take, and it took us 9.5 hours. It usually only takes about 8 or so, but we hit a ton of traffic on Interstate 80. As you know, there are 4 seasons in the Midwest, and it's fall, winter, spring, and construction season. So construction season has started with a vengeance, and we were stop and go for at least a couple hours on Interstate 80 going through Pennsylvania. And again, heavily delayed. I want to talk about a couple electrical glitches that this truck has experienced. But first I want to mention the gas mileage. And on about a 550 mile trip, one way, with close to 30 miles of what's called electric driving. And all that electric driving means is that the engine is off. That's all it means. So you could be either coasting downhill with the engine off and the hybrid system in a regen mode, or you could be going uphill, or you could be going on flat ground with the engine off and the hybrid system providing electric power. Either way, essentially, if it's driving with the engine off, that's called electric driving. Whether or not there's electric power actually going out to the wheels, or whether it's just coasting, or whether it's regenning. But with 30 miles of regenning, or I should say electric driving, and pretty reasonable speeds. You know, we weren't going 90, we weren't going 85, we were doing between, I'm gonna say 70 and 80 almost the entire way, and that's what I consider reasonable speeds. We got approximately 22 MPGs over the course of a 500 mile trip. And you know, to us that's good. To us that's really good, because we come from a world where a pickup truck gets 16 miles on the highway or city, and that's just what you have to deal with. You just have to accept that fact because of all the benefits you get from driving a pickup. But in this F-150 hybrid, again, we got 22 MPGs over the course of about a 550 mile road trip, and to us that's good. To other people that's actually not good, because you know, people are constantly saying, well, I get better than that in my 2.7 non-hybrid EcoBoost. Well, shit, I get 20 or 21 in my 5-liter V8. Or I get, you know, 25 MPGs in my EcoBoost. And so I'm going to repeat for about the 19th time, anybody buying the hybrid, meaning the PowerBoost, with the expectation that they're going to get stellar MPGs, or even the EPA rated 24 highway, 24 city, don't hold your breath, because it's probably not going to happen. Unless you're driving it like your 90-year-old grandmother would, as we've said a couple times. And what we've got now is there are a bunch of screens that come up. This one is the EV coach screen, and it essentially tells you, you know, what you need to do to capture as much energy as possible when you're slowing down by, you know, lightly getting on the brakes, and then how to preserve as much energy when you're accelerating by, you know, tapping the accelerator as lightly as possible, or just easing into it as lightly as possible. So you can see we're slowing down now, and the goal there is to keep that little needle in that range there, and that's the range where it's that right there, that's the range where it's regenning without actually using the mechanical brakes. And then when you get on the accelerator, this is the range where it is accelerating in electric mode only. And then if you get on the gas any harder than that, the engine comes on. And so it's not super useful to us, because we don't drive this thing like a Prius. But even so, we had that showing yesterday, and it's interesting. You know, in stop and go traffic, it becomes kind of a game to see how long you can go without having the engine kick on. And when you're in stop and go traffic on the downhill, it's easy. When you're in stop and go traffic on the level ground or the uphill, it's a little bit harder. But for the 19th time, we did not buy this truck to save gas. We bought it for all the other things you get out of it. Most prominently, the 7.2 kilowatt Pro Power onboard system, which is just absolutely tremendous. And we've used it a couple times now. But I want to talk about electrical glitches. And the first one that this thing has had, none of them are bad enough to actually kill the vehicle or disable it or destroy its functionality in any way. But here's what I'll say. The first one and most glaring is the fact that the audio in our B&O sound system has cut out now completely, twice now. Once back in the winter period when we were in when the truck was still in San Diego. It's been about 8 months there last year, and then it came back just around Christmas time. But the audio system would not produce any volume, and so you'd be turning the volume knob here, and if there was anything playing, you'd see an indicator of what the volume was. And that volume knob, as much as you turn it or press the volume buttons on the steering wheel, it produced no sound out of the speakers. And we did a lot of searching and Googling and trying to figure out what it was. And eventually, like 3 pages deep into some F-150 forums website, somebody said that, oh, that's the amplifier that cut out, and the audio amplifier. And to reset the audio amplifier, you just have to find the fuse that goes to it and pull that fuse and then put it back in. Because the fuse hasn't been popped by like an overload of power. It's just that something has gone wrong with the audio amp, and it just needs to be reset by having the power to it, by having the power killed, and then restored once you plug the fuse back in. And so we had to do that back in Christmas time frame. And once we figured out what fuse it was the number 28 in what's called the body control module fuse box, otherwise known as the passenger kick panel fuse box. And once you find that fuse, you got to grab it with like a set of pliers or a vice grip, yank it out, maybe wait 5 seconds, and then put it back in, and the sound system's good as new. Unfortunately, the owner's manual and the dashboard didn't do any good in terms of helping us locate the fuse box. We thought at first that it was the fuse box under the hood, and that's not the case. It's the fuse box in the passenger side kick panel. That fuse box has a lid which does not have any kind of a diagram on it. It doesn't have a fuse pillar like our nearly 20-year-old Ford Expedition does. And so there was a lot of stuff we just had to figure out for ourselves in a way that you'd expect. You would not expect you'd have to in a $60,000 pickup truck. But anyway, we got that mystery solved. And then again, a couple weeks ago, it happened for the second time. And it actually took us just as long to fix it the second time as it did the first time, because we forgot the location of that number 28 fuse, the 30 amp fuse. We had, in the video we made about it, we had said, oh yeah, it's this one here. It's the fourth one up on the left, from the bottom left. And that's actually not that fuse. That's some other fuse. So you got to go back and check the diagram, find the number 28 fuse, and yank it out, and put it back in maybe 5 seconds later, with or without the vehicle power on. And then your sound system will be good as new. Okay, there's a second glitch, and this has happened since the day we bought this vehicle. You see how the gauges are set up here? It's got your temp gauge on the far left, oil pressure second from the left, transmission temp third from the left, and then finally your fuel gauge on the far right. Those 4 gauges there, the 4 auxiliary gauges. And the 2 in the middle are selectable. And you just go into the menus. I'll show you here when we stop. And you can select what those 2 gauges are gonna have. And we prefer the one on the right to be your boost pressure, your turbo boost pressure, and then the one on the left there to be your transmission temp. So you got engine temp, transmission temp, turbo boost, and then your fuel gauge. And that's just what we prefer. And the problem is, when you set it up and it's the way you want it, sometimes the very next time you go and start the vehicle, it'll be something else. It'll be back to the factory settings, which is what you see here. And then you take, 15, 20, 30 seconds to reset it. And, drive your vehicle for a while. And then the next time you park and turn it off, it goes back to the factory settings. And sometimes it'll stay in there for a while. But again, the fact that it is constantly, again, those, they call them the selectable gauges. The one right there and the one right there are constantly going back to the factory settings. That's just a little bit annoying. Okay, that's the second glitch, and there's no known fix for it. And a lot of people have talked about it. And it's not the end of the world. It's just kind of annoying, again, in a $60,000 truck that you have to keep fiddling with your gauge settings. The third is that the CarPlay system, it sometimes does not want to connect to your phone. We've got a connector right now by virtue of the fact that our phone is plugged in to one of the two USBs in the dashboard there. And so it's connected by cable, but in the last couple weeks, it has decided it doesn't want to connect by Wi-Fi, or what's called wireless CarPlay, which is how Sync 4 is supposed to work. And so essentially we're using the backup system, which is the, connecting it by plugging in your phone. And we've just had one problem or another with the phone not connecting to the sync system, or to the, or even to the Bluetooth system at all. And when you've got a passenger and they want to connect their phone, it just seems like it takes, you got to go to the phone list here, and then you got to say, okay, it's this one here, it's that one there, and then you got to go back and forth and connect or disconnect, and it's just a real hassle. For the majority of the time we've owned the vehicle, it would connect immediately when you get in and turn on the vehicular power with the power switch there. And then again, in about the last month, it has stopped doing that. And so, we could take 20, 30 minutes and try to troubleshoot it and figure out why it's not connecting wirelessly. And we probably will eventually, but it's just kind of annoying that you're constantly having a, fight with this thing to get it to connect to the phone that you want it to connect to. Sync 4, by the way, the wireless sync and the wireless CarPlay, that actually uses your phone's Wi-Fi connection in order to provide the connection speed and the bandwidth that you need to run your CarPlay wirelessly. But the initial communication between the phone and the vehicle is on Bluetooth. And that's the thing we're having a hard time establishing. Okay, so those three glitches are the only real major electrical problems we've had.